Welcome to the April 21st, 2025 regularly scheduled work session. Tonight, there are 6 items on the agenda. Public comment is allowed that is germane to an agenda item. If you wish to speak, you are required to fill out a public comment card, and if you are speaking on behalf of an organization, you must fill out an affidavit that you have the authority of said organization. Please remember this is not a time to engage in conversation with the mayor or members of city council. When your name is called, please come forward and speak into the microphone stating your name and address for the record. Public comment will be allowed for a total of 10 minutes per agenda item and no more than 2 minutes per person. Once the item is called, no other public cards will be accepted. Will you please sound agenda item A?
Good evening, Mayor. That first item is the Milton Equestrian Committee update. Our liaison, Emily Salerno.
Fantastic. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Again, I feel like I've seen you all so much the past couple of weeks. It's been lovely, my pleasure. But my actual pleasure tonight is I'm excited to introduce our Milton Equestrian Committee. They're going to tonight share some of their recent work, some of their big accomplishments from 2024, and give you a little preview of what they're going to plan to work on for 2025. So without further ado, I'll kick it off to our chairperson, Tony Rich.
Sit down. Cool. Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor and distinguished members of City Council. It's nice to be with you all tonight. I'm glad there's not a big crowd out there. That makes us feel a little better. But we appreciate the opportunity to come up and speak with you all tonight. We've had a lot of interesting things going on in our committee this past year, and we have been looking forward to coming up and sharing it with you all. So Shannon Regan-Quidley is with me tonight, as well as Carson Seville. So we'll try to be brief and share a few things with you and let these guys come up and share what they've been working on as well. So I'll go through these slides. It shouldn't take long. If you have any questions, by all means, please let us know. I won't go through every name. I think you all know who you appointed, but just to kind of give you an overview of who our committee is, I thought maybe we would spend a second and just talk about who we are as a committee. You know, all of us that are on the Milton Equestrian Committee are very passionate about our farms and our horses. We all living in Milton. We all realize and believe what we know makes it special, which is why we're all so excited to serve on this committee. Every person that sits on the Milton Equestrian Committee is a farm owner. I believe I looked, and if you take all of our farms into account, we're over about 120 acres of land in Milton. So we understand large lots. We understand what it takes to keep the fences up and keep things mowed and in good shape. So I'm real happy to know that I'm surrounded by people that own farms. Every person here either owns horses or has owned horses. Some of us are competitors. I am not one of those competitors, but certainly I'm glad to know that some of the folks on this committee are competitors, dressage, hunter jumper, and that type of thing. And some of us on the Milton Equestrian Committee own businesses that are tied to the equine industry, which I think is a real important element to the whole thing. At the end of every year, we sit and we talk about what we've accomplished in the past year, and we look forward to what we want to focus on in the new year. Everything that we do, and which is why I put the barn in the center. Everything that we do focuses and it revolves around our farms. Land preservation and land use is a topic that comes up again and again in Milton. And I think that everything we do surrounds that one premise of trying to preserve our property, trying to encourage people to invest in farms in Milton, and trying to keep people that have farms to stay in Milton. You can't do that without community. The people that we meet all the time, whether they're equestrians or non-equestrians, I think bringing people together to learn about the farms and to really get more excited about some of the things that make Milton unique, I think are important. So we do a lot of things throughout the year to try to bring people together. I think we all call Milton a small town, but we try to do things that make it feel more like a small town. And then finally, it's all about the horses, right? It's all about the amenities. You know, we're proud and excited about Birmingham Park. I think there's a lot of improvements that we can make in our equestrian amenities throughout Milton, and we'll talk about that more in a little bit. So, with that in mind, I'll turn it over to Shannon.
Hi, I'm Shannon Regan-Quidley, And I'm going to talk to you guys about some things that we did last year and are planning to do this year. We had our Birmingham Park cleanup on March 8th. We had over 40 volunteers come out.
Yeah.
40 volunteers come out. They did the trail inspections, trimmed the trees, trash pickup, cleared out the riding paths. We have new signage. They raised beds. And so we're just really trying to draw more community awareness to that. The next thing we have is actually coming up. It's April 13th. I'm sorry, May 10th. May 10th is Meet the Neighbors. Last year was April 13th. It's our fourth annual event. It was a huge success last year. We had over 700 in attendance. This year we expect more because we've brought awareness to the activity. We're going to have 32 vendors this year, live music, which is new, and much needed help with parking. Last year, parking was a huge concern and it was a problem. And so this year, our goal is to make it more organized for people. It was also really muddy last year. I think that kind of did not help at all. And then we're currently working on doing a hands-on event or activity for the kids. We kind of tossed around an idea of maybe a grooming seminar and teaching them about the different brushes and how to, pick a hoof and things like that. Just something a little more interactive. And then if you guys want to talk about barn safety and
Part of what we do is education. It's really teaching people that may not know a whole lot about the equestrian community, just, different aspects of what people that own horses actually go through. It's been 2 weeks ago, there was a big story in the news about a barn fire down in Milton, or down in Florida, right outside of Ocala. It was horrific. And there have been a number of these over the past several years. And every time we hear about a barn fire, it's not a little one. It's not like, hey, they got there, they put it out and it was no big deal. It's, they lost 20 horses, they lost 25 horses. And I've never personally experienced a barn fire, but I can't imagine what a big barn looks like after it burns to the ground and it's full of horses. I think that would be horrendous. A couple of years ago, we started a conversation with our fire department, and they actually put out an information sheet, and they've offered to come out and do complimentary assessments of individual barns, just to give people an idea of what they can do to prevent fires. And whether it's where you should place your fire extinguisher or where you should place flammable materials and stuff like that, they have come out and actually done some complimentary assessments. I actually had them out to our place. Our fire marshal, Andrew Kennedy, came out and not only walked our barn and gave us some really good ideas, but he actually did a seminar at our barn this past year. And we had a handful of people from around the community come out, and he gave a huge presentation just on the big sources of barn fires, what you can do to prevent them, and actually what you should do if you actually have a fire and you're there to try to do something about it. So we thought it was pretty interesting. Earlier this year, actually after the 4th of July, there was a story. We had someone come to one of our equestrian committees who the fireworks at the 4th of July this past year actually rained ashes and sparks down on their hay barn. And they were out there with a water hose and a fire extinguisher that night. And that really sparked a conversation about, we've all talked about noise and fireworks and horses. And I think a lot of people are really sensitive to that, but we haven't spent a whole lot of time talking about the risk of fires in barns. And fireworks could be a real serious source of fires in barns. And so thankfully, our mayor and our city manager were very supportive. We had a great conversation with Speaker Pro Tem Jan Jones, and she sponsored Bill 614 that had to do with fireworks in barns. And so we were very, very pleased and just appreciative that she was able to get that through the House and the Senate. So we're looking forward to seeing that go into law and, seeing how we roll that out. And the last thing I'll mention as far as safety initiatives, there was a story a couple of months ago about a young lady that was in the middle of a horse show down in Florida. And in the middle of her ride, she went into cardiac arrest. She fell off her horse. She was out in the middle of the arena. And luckily, the facility where she was riding had an AED on site. They were able to find it, and they resuscitated her 4 times and brought her back. And we met the parents a few weeks ago. They came in and spoke with some of our equestrian committee members. And they said if there wouldn't have been an AED on site at that barn, that she would have died. And so we've had some great conversations just about educating our barn owners and facility owners just to put AEDs on site. We've talked about doing some CPR training with our equestrian community, and that's something that we're really looking forward to working on. So just a couple things that we've been spending our time on. I told you I'd kill it. Oh, there you go. All right, we'll talk about this.
Oh, yeah, sure. And then for digital outreach, that's a big goal this year. We're really trying to find creative ways to get ourselves out there. We've done some things on social media. We have Ask the Equestrian Story of the Month, and then Nan had done a couple of YouTube videos on fireworks and navigating around horse trailers. And so we feel like we need to amp that up a little bit more. So that is one goal for the upcoming year. We also want to do some education and increased awareness, maybe just some initiatives around that. But really, social media is going to drive a lot of our focus this year. And now we want to talk about large lot incentives. In collaboration with community development, the objective of MEC is to prioritize and support large lot incentives that encourage the sustainability of both current and new farms. Our goal is to contribute to Milton's vision of a unique, rural, and outstanding reputation. Here are some proposed items for your consideration. Number 1, manure disposal. We'd like to provide a manure compost site for residents to drop off manure. We have heard numerous farm owners say that this would be something they'd really be interested in, especially some of the smaller farms that don't have the space for manure and doing all the piles and composting, and it's a lot of work. So we feel like it would be fantastic if we could have a site in Milton where residents would they would have to get it to the site. So you fill up your pickup truck or whatever you have, and you take it to the site and you get it there. And then once it's composted, we could offer it up to the public for their gardens, planting, anything else that they would like to use it for. The next one is pasture management. We would like to provide pasture maintenance services through a third party that would offer no-till pasture planting and application of herbicides and fertilizing. We think this would be a fantastic incentive. We personally know that it takes a lot of time to do this, and it's a lot of money. So if we could partner maybe with a third party and get maybe like a group discount or something like that, where people could utilize a service, I think it would be a great incentive. And another one is reduced variances and permits. We would like to see reduced variance requirements. The current is 100 feet for structures housing animals such as barns, chicken coops, and run-in sheds. We would like to reduce permit requirements for run-in sheds, chicken coops, and farm sheds. Of course, we would have to figure out what the maximum square footage for that would be. But that is something that we would like to discuss further. And then Carson's going to talk to you guys about CUVA.
Thank you, Shannon. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name's Carson Seville, and we're going to start off on CUVAs, and I think everybody's familiar with what this is, but it's basically a 10-year period where you have a reduced property tax with the county. This is all through Fulton County in exchange for not developing your land. So right now, we're going to look at the map here in a minute to show all the CUVAs that's currently active in Milton, but we have about 94, 95 to 100 CUVAs. They're very tough to track because property owners have different addresses tied to the CUVA. This is going to protect that land. It's going to ensure that we have large lots into the future, and we'd like to provide educational seminars to the public, be online and in person, to help residents understand the CUVA process, how to apply, because it can be a tough task if you've never done it. So next, we're going to jump to ag exemptions. believe y'all have had this come before you a few times, and we've worked really hard with staff and Jeff, city attorney, to talk through this, what the state definition is. It's a very broad definition, and we've decided that the word commercial is not in that definition, but we've really had some good conversation on what an ag exemption is: furthering or extending the bona fide ag use of the property. So I'm going to give you some examples. If you have a pasture or a piece of land, let's say, and you want to clear that piece of land, if you are doing it to further, let's say you need additional pasture for your horses, or you want to put a hay pasture in, or you want to take trees out to put a fence in for your agricultural use, that would be a bona fide ag use. Now, if you have a tree next to your house you don't like, or you have 10 chickens and you think you can clear 10 acres of land, that's not a bona fide ag use, because it's not continuing the process of the ag-related activity. So we're also looking at some penalties. We're still working on that, but our goal here is that we don't grant an ag exemption to somebody that turns around and flips the property to a developer and takes advantage of the system. So we're working through that, but had a lot of help from Jeff and Ken and everybody, and really appreciate them working with us and put a lot of time into it. And one thing also, actually, let me go back to this slide. We'd like to propose that MEC, to help staff determine if a property is ag exempt or not, potentially our committee hearing the case at our monthly meeting. And then, because like Tony said, we're all 100% farm owners, we can tell, okay, this person is a bona fide ag use. We can ask them questions, see what their potential uses are going to be, and determine from there, okay, are we going to grant this or not? And as an advisory board to staff. All right, this is the fun part. So most of you here last year, you saw the map that we created. We're going to go ahead and pull this up. Okay, so can everybody see this? Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is the city limits of Milton in green. And we've got a couple different sections this year. So the first one we're going to show, these are new farms found in 2025. These are not newly built farms, but they are new farms that we've added to the map that weren't on here last year. So there's a lot of them out there. We just missed these somehow. Horses were in the barns. I'm not sure what happened, but we missed them. So there's 13 of those. These orange ones are newly built or renovated farms. So these are built from the ground up, or came into a property and completely renovated it, or bought a farm that didn't have horses and now have horses, cows, or donkeys. This is only large livestock we're talking here. No goats, chickens, anything like that. So anything you see on here is strictly large livestock. So next, we're going to show active farms. So that is 200 of the same farms you saw last year. We pulled a couple of them off that we throughout the year saw, okay, there's no horses here. We're going to go ahead and move this to what we call a potential farm. So right now you're looking at about 226 farms that have horses on them, horses, donkeys, or cows. There's only a handful of cows. Most of these are horses, and there's a few donkeys. And lastly, I'm going to take this active off real quick so you can see these potentials better. Potential farms are fenced with a structure housing animals that can house animals, but don't have horses or any kind of livestock on them. So there's a lot of properties in Milton that could be a farm. The owners just don't have livestock. And there's several right behind Birmingham Freemanville Park that are just vacant. So we thought it was important to include those on here. And then one other thing I'll show you is the CUVAs. These are the yellow pins, or the CUVAs in the city. And there's 94 of them on this map. Like I said, it's tough to track all of them because sometimes they're not tied to a specific address. But we feel like, we know the numbers of all these large lots, and I'm going to read those off real quick, and then I'll wrap up. We've got 1,400 properties over 3 acres, and we've got 257 properties over 10 acres. And the pins you're looking at right here are the active farms. The average parcel of those are 12 acres. So there's just by this, and this map doesn't include any of the large lots that are just nice big estate properties. This is only animals and active farms. So these large lot incentives are crucial right now because there's no other city in Georgia that has a layout like this. So we've got something unique. And if we can put these large lot incentives into place and really show these homeowners and new residents that we're here for you, and we want to incentivize these. We can continue to keep Milton the way it is that we all love. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Tony.
So I guess in concluding, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the idea of an active equestrian park. I've had conversations with a handful of folks about the idea of this. Our committee's been talking about this for the last couple of years. It seems like perhaps it's gotten some more attention, but I think it's something that we really ought to talk about and we should explore. And we really ought to think about what it would do to the identity of Milton. We've had a lot of conversations about active sports fields, about how people move to Milton because of our active sports programs. But equestrian is a sport, and we really don't have an active equestrian property of any sort in Milton. Years ago, before Milton was in existence, I guess we had Wills Park that we considered our local equestrian facility, but that's Alpharetta. I think it would be really good for us to have something that we could hang our equestrian hat on. And I look forward to exploring what that's going to look like with you all. So with that in mind, thanks for the opportunity. And no one interrupted with questions, so I'm sure you're all holding them to the very end. Sir.
Tell me a little bit about what an equestrian center is like. I mean, how big are they? What do you need to have? What does it look like?
I think you could go 10 different directions with that. I think it could be something really small. I think it could be a community-based place where kids are first introduced to the idea of riding horses, right? It could be something with a covered arena. It could be something with an uncovered arena. It could be something that offers trail rides. It could be something that houses horses or not. I think it would depend on what the city really wants to do with it. I think you could, like I said, it could have a lot of flavors. I haven't heard anybody in my conversations tell me that they want something that looks like Wills Park. That is huge. It would take a lot of land, and I can't even imagine that we would really want to do something like that. But something on a smaller scale, again, I'm all about the next generation of riders. It's like a lot of great sports. They're aging out. Where's the next young generation of kids that want to ride horses? I would love nothing more than to have a place where somebody who lives in White Columns that's never touched a horse in their life could go to our community equestrian center and have their kids sit on a horse the first time. I think that'd be pretty interesting.
Is that something that you would hire out to like a third party to manage the day-to-day sort of thing? Like it wouldn't be like city staff, right? It would be someone you parse that out to?
I think that's a good question, and I don't think anybody's really come up with a definitive answer on that.
Yeah.
I think it's so early in the conversation. I think you could go a lot of places with this. I can't imagine the city would want to hire a bunch of staff to run a barn. But at the same time, I think there's probably all kinds of ways to go to a third party to do something like that. But what it would look like, I don't know. But I sure would love the opportunity to come up with a business plan. All you guys have to do is tell us if we get the green light to do it. And I know there's a lot of people that would love to put pen to paper and come up with a really neat idea. And then we could go from there with it.
Yeah, that's my thought. Is it would require a business plan because it would be something
Yeah.
distinctly different than Parks and Rec currently.
Mhm.
And if the equestrian committee wants to be kind of the arm that's helpful in running that,
Yep.
that would be kind of along with PRAD, separate from Parks and Rec.
I
I do
agree.
think it would be interesting to see what a business plan would look like.
I think it would be, and I mean, we've bounced around, people all the time see, this piece of property or that piece of property and like, what about this? Or what about this? And a lot of times, you can pick the property and then do the business plan. That's kind of like the tail wagging the dog. Or you can come up with the business plan and say, hey, here's really what we want to do with this thing, and then try to find the right piece of property to fit that business plan. So I don't know. I think it would be pretty exciting to explore it, though. So,
Okay, I have a couple questions. Thank you for that. Is the 501(c) that was established a long time ago to raise money, is that active?
I don't think so. I think a couple of the equestrian committee members from several years ago, was that the land trust or something like that?
It was a while ago.
Yeah, that was Liz Gervais and Larry
It was,
Covington and all
yeah.
those folks. Yeah. My understanding is they shut it down.
Okay.
And I don't know why. I don't know a whole lot of the details, but the last conversation I had, I got the impression that it was not active.
Yeah, I think something like that would help a
It's a
whole
great
discussion
idea.
about a location.
Yep.
On the subject of composting, how do you see that managed? Because that requires a lot of maintenance. How-
So we've tried a lot of different options on this. We had a company out of Jasper, I think, that's doing several farms around here. And it's just the small farms don't either have enough, or they don't have the equipment to, and they can't leave a dumpster there.
No, I can
From- so-
appreciate the need for it. I'm just saying, but where they take it, it has to be
Right.
composted. It has to be moved at certain intervals. It has to be
Mhm.
flipped over. It's got to go from this bay to this bay to this bay until
Right.
it's ready at 6 months.
So that company, when we met with them, they actually came to our meeting. They told us that they, instead of flipping, they will just line it up, let's call it 20 or 30 yards wide, and keep adding to that line. And it's a slower method of doing it. And that's why we put the 2 years in there. But after about 2 to 3 years, that compost eventually will turn to soil without flipping it, according to him. I mean, we're pretty new into this. We might be wrong on that, but he's claiming that after a few years, that compost, like I pull compost from my neighbors and it just sits and piles up. And
I
it's,
was going to say,
I throw it in our pasture all the time if I have a bare spot. But that's the general idea, is that after 2 or 3 years, you have this line of compost, and I could imagine putting who is it? The Public Works putting a stake somewhere saying, okay, this from here back is free compost for the residents. And then after 6 months, we move that stake down once we test it and see that, okay, this is plant ready. It's just an idea to somehow try to
so you
get a
haven't gotten very
solution.
far down the path on that.
We're running out of options, to
Okay.
be honest. We can't find a good solution besides that. And I don't know how many people would jump on board of loading their truck up with trash cans of manure and then unloading them again. But, that's been a big concern for a lot of people that have
Yeah.
reached out to us.
Thanks, Carson. And one final thing, the whole thing about the variance, the 100-foot variance, the problem, I think everybody recognizes this, is your current neighbor may be all right with it. But then at the end of the day, if something's built closer than the normal setback, if the property goes up for resale, it could be a problem. It could be a problem for the neighbor that agreed to it. It could be a problem for the person. So I'm in favor of that, but it depends on the size of the structure. Too many people have built barns that are way too big for a very small piece of property. And that's probably job number one, is to make sure they're just not too big. So, thank you.
Any other questions from council? No? Y'all are doing great, moving in the right direction.
I do have one
Shoot,
question.
yeah.
So what does the process look like for you to begin putting together a business plan if we were to do something like that?
The equestrian center stuff?
Mhm.
I think we just come up with the right people to sit down and go through it. It's not just people that own a barn and a piece of land. I think it's people that have been parts of a center like that in the past or have seen it. It might be having trainers involved. It might be having people that have run, mid-sized equestrian operations before. But I think if you put the right little group of people together and really make an effort to go forward with it, I think we could put a little task force together and knock it out. So if that's something you guys would be interested in seeing, I would love the chance to sit down and put pen to paper and just try to start pulling ideas together.
Very much so.
Okay.
I think so.
And I'll be happy to help if you need some help.
You would be on the top of the list.
You're so kind.
We have 2 equestrians on our city council that would absolutely be part of the brain force behind that. So
Have you guys considered Birmingham Park? Would that be a potential location to do such a thing?
I
Or
think
would-
you'd have to look at Birmingham Park. I mean, we have so much land there. And I've heard that suggestion come up before. So I think you would have to do that.
When I thought about the composting, if you need a lot of
No.
land,
I think that would be the right place to do a composting operation. Whether we could get into the maintenance lot up there or just a place that you could, designate for that whole thing. And I know nothing about composting. We haul ours out. So I don't know anything about it firsthand, but it seems to me like that would be a pretty good central spot to do it.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
Or we put some roll-offs somewhere, and maybe that's an expense that cumulative we could handle, because that would be a lot cheaper than managing composting.
I just don't know how you would get it from the farm to the roll-off.
Well, Liz does it. She takes hers
Okay.
somewhere in the back of the.
There's logistics in there, but like I said, I think the general idea is that it's a concept that we should explore. People spend a fortune on manure removal. And thankfully, it hasn't been a problem for us. But I know some of these barns that have lots of horses, I can't even imagine what Seven Hands Farms pays in manure removal every month. That would just
And
be-
people spend a fortune on fertilizer.
What's that?
And people spend a lot of money on fertilizer. So
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
You're
I get a
right.
call about once a week about people coming to pick up fertilizer from me.
Really?
And we don't turn ours either, by the way, Carson. No.
So nature just takes a course and it turns it into fertilizer.
Yeah, but it's been like the same pile for 30 years. So you
But
just
they-
get
but
it
they're
from the
not,
back.
they're not taking it off the top where
No,
it's
no, they take
high.
it from the back.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been there for a long time. Yeah,
Hmm.
sure.
Okay. It's good stuff.
Manure, topic of.
I know. Out of everything.
I mean, I think they're,
Say about most of our meetings, right?
but I think they're both interesting concepts, right? Because in both cases, you're talking about things that are potentially either services to our citizens or potentially even revenue generation for the city. And so,
Easy
Yeah.
win on that.
why
I
not?
think there's all kinds of ways to centralize services, and it would be great for farm owners, and it could have a benefit to the city.
Yeah, I mean, and that goes hand in
Revenue.
hand with your large lot incentives, right? If you make it easier for folks to do all this, then
Yeah.
surely they'll stay.
For sure.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, the Cuva is a big deal. It's amazing how many people I talk to that still don't understand they can put their property in a Cuva. And when I explain it to them, they're like, oh, that makes perfect sense. So that education is important for sure.
It is such a complex process, and I've mentioned to several people in the past, I would love to see one person on our city staff that is an absolute expert in CUVAs that could field those calls, because I don't think it's as clean cut as anybody ever thinks it is, until you decide to explore it, and then you realize there's a lot of spokes to the wheel. So, thank y'all.
I appreciate it.
Thank
Good
you.
work.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
everybody.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate
That
it.
was great.
Did we have any public comment on that?
Not on that one, sir.
Okay. Will you please call the next item?
Our next item B is the Arnold Mills Small Area Plan presentation. Our principal planner, Shiva Jangam.
Sorry. I couldn't find my PowerPoint. There's too many on our mail. Right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Shubha Jangam, Principal Planner. I'm here with my project team and our consulting partners from TSW. We have two items on the agenda related to Honor Mill project. The first one is small area plan for the Honor Mill character area. We're presenting a complete overview of the what we have accomplished over the year through this planning process. Last October, we shared with you the concept plan that we had developed with the help of community. We are presenting all of that again today for two reasons. First, it is a groundwork for what is being proposed in the next agenda item. And two, we are requesting the small area plan to be adopted on May 5th. So, but today we are only asking your feedback, and we're happy to answer questions about the plan. So now I would like to invite Nick Johnson to get started with the presentation on Honor Mill small area.
Thank you, Shubha. Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's an honor to be in front of you again. I think last time I saw you was about 6 months ago. So it's a privilege. And I'm joined by Caleb, who will be presenting the second half of our presentation. We have one slide deck for both agenda items. I'm going to quickly make this full screen. All right. So I'll just be covering the small area plan overview, which is the first bullet on this slide. So as you may recall, and as Shubha alluded to, this small area plan is an exploration of the Arnold Mill Road character area from the comp plan, the comprehensive plan. There was a visioning study done in 2014 to establish what people hoped about to maintain about the corridor, what they hoped would change. This is a plan that doesn't update necessarily, but seeks to validate what those items were that we want to stay the same, and then explore an update to that plan for today's context. So what you'll see today is a set of recommendations that are, specified from that visioning study. The goal of the small area plan was to develop the plan in keeping with community wishes and maintaining Milton's rural character. On the right, you see the project area map, which extends along the entirety of Arnold Mill Road from the Cherokee County line down to approximately where we are now. It's a 3-mile stretch. As you all know, Arnold Mill Road is very rural in character. It's a 2-lane road. It's a state highway managed by GDOT. And it sees upwards of 20,000 cars a day, which is part of the reason why we wanted to do the small area plan in the first place, because that was maybe not the case 10 years ago. But for the most part, the surrounding land uses are very rural in nature: agricultural uses, forested tracts, equestrian uses, and some single-family houses on large lots. This was our planning process. We started just over a year ago in February 2024 on some of the background analysis work. We had a public kickoff late March. And then 2 more community meetings. We had an in-depth community workshop in June where we were doing hands-on design work with the community, and we can get their feedback in real time. That was held at the Ebenezer Church in the study area. And then the public open house where we presented our recommendations and findings for further feedback. All of this is leading to development of the plan and establishment of the community-supported vision that we wanted to take to the next level and make sure that it could be codified so that it could be implemented more successfully by the city. And so that's why we're here in front of you today to present the plan and then present our recommendations for the regulatory side. So we noticed some major themes emerge from the analysis as well as the community feedback that we got all around these 3 points that you see on your screen at the moment. The first and most important one was transportation. The traffic congestion along Arnold Mill Road is a major pain point for the people who live in the corridor and travel along it. But the community does not want the road to lose its pastoral charm. So that is really the spirit of our recommendations, tries to balance those 2 concerns as best we can. The second theme is that people did want to see some new development along Arnold Mill Road, but confined to key locations, concentrated in what we're calling activity nodes that will have both a mix of uses, mostly residential, some modest retail and commercial. And then lastly, the third major theme was design, making sure that whatever the development is or whatever the character of the roadway is, it upholds that classic rural aesthetic Milton feel. So the first thing that we addressed was the transportation. Our team looked at this corridor many different ways. And we really looked at it, we scrutinized it pretty in depth because we knew that this document was a chance for the city to establish a proactive vision for how to design the roadway so that it could maintain Milton's character as opposed to just engage in transportation updates that would sacrifice that character, if that makes sense. Through our analysis, it became very clear that widening the road is the single most effective thing that you can do to relieve traffic pressure. But we also wanted to come up with a roadway design that we thought embodied those characteristics of Milton. So what you see on your screen in front of you is 3 street sections. They are all different widths because the roadway right-of-way fluctuates from north to south, but they all have the same elements. The first element that you'll see is that wide landscaped median in the center, which is intended to follow the center line of the roadway. Off to the right, that would be the part of the road that is fully in the City of Milton's jurisdiction. There is a multi-use path as well as a vegetated buffer that expands and contracts depending on the full right-of-way constraints. But in each concept, you see vegetation, the classic Milton fence, and the multi-use path, which is, I believe, a recommendation that's already been made in the comprehensive plan. The second big theme that emerged was these mixed-use development activity nodes. We validated that the best locations for these were the same as in the 2014 visioning study, one at the junction of Cox Road and Arnold Mill Road, and then the other right at the Cherokee County line, just between the road and the landfill. We did two concepts for this first activity node, really to show what could be possible under the current zoning, but then also with some dimensional standards that are a little bit different. So this first concept is designed in accordance with AG1, except for the existence of the retail at the center. The lot sizes are to code. There are 31 single-family lots. They're all 1 acre. And this concept would abide by a 60-foot rural view shed along Arnold Mill Road, along with approximately 10 acres of green space. Contrasted with the second concept, you can see that the number of single-family lots are the same. So the density is the same between both concepts, but they are oriented in such a way that the lot widths are a little bit smaller in some cases, to allow for greater environmental and natural resource preservation. There's a larger vegetative buffer preserved between 150 to 200 feet in this concept, and slightly more commercial that's actually oriented around a central courtyard instead of just off to the side.
Will you go back to the prior slide again?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you. You can go on. I just wanted to see the difference again between the two.
I wanted to make sure you got a good look. So in both the case of the roadway sections and this concept, this concept would require some code modifications. And this is what we have developed to present to you all today. But they are both being codified in this proposed code update that we are presenting later. The second node is further north. So north is to the left of the screen in this drawing. This is more of a gateway village that would enable a little bit of brand recognition for the city through some gateway signage. The concept is a country inn with 16 cottages, about 8,000 square feet of new village commercial and office. Importantly, it would preserve the McConnell-Chadwick House, and eventually, after the landfill is completely remediated, it is the vision to transform that into a public park, perhaps with an educational component as well. So those are the main recommendations that form the backbone of this plan. And as I mentioned, the concepts and the roadway redesign, those have both been, we've worked on a draft code for those so that they could be codified by the city. The plan is live on the City of Milton website, and the next step would be to adopt it by resolution in a week's time. Not sure if we should pause for questions now or.
I have some.
Yes.
I have
Yes,
some.
ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So would you go back to the first concept that showed the park? All right. Because I've interacted a lot with some of the private property owners, could you show me the Mitnick property and also Ms. Williams' property?
I might have to ask Shubha for help with that.
Okay.
I think
And also the
this
property
is-
that we own.
this is his property because he owns property next to the two lots that city bought for the park. So I think this over here, this.
You overlay the.
Let me go a little further and I can show you on the zoning map. These two properties are actually Mr. Mitnick's.
Okay. So then, all right, let's see if I can remember that. We'll go back. I don't know if I'm that smart. All right, let's go back.
Yeah. So over here, if you see, it will be right here, but not this space. This is a big property that is not by Mr. Mitnick. Mitnick would own only these.
Is that Burton property back there? Is it?
Yeah.
Thank you, Robin. Okay. So, and Williams' property is next to the Mitnick property?
Yes,
Mr.
yes.
Mitnick? Okay.
So if I show you on this one, these two are Miss Smith, Dr. Smith.
So, and I know that I had some questions the last time you were here, and I was curious to see where this was going to go. So we've taken private property and decided how it would be built out, which is quite contrary to what I think of as property rights, where people bring us concepts that we approve. And have we gotten interest from the property owners? Because I've not spoken with them in over a month. Have we gotten interest from the property owners that this is a plan that they want to see come to fruition?
Yes, the stakeholders were involved creating this plan. Mr. Mitnick didn't attend every meeting, but I think he came for open houses or something like that. But Dr. Smith was there, other property owners were there. We sat down with them. It was a live process to draw what could be the vision. And we were tasked to come up with a vision that a community will accept. That's the reason we have used the private property, which is a green field right now. If there is nothing on these properties, we have excluded the properties that already have houses on them, and we focused on the properties that are green field to come up with a concept.
Well, thank you. It's not consistent with what I think I understood from Mr. Mitnick in the email that he sent after the last meeting, that this is not a plan in which he is in favor, and I could be wrong because things may change, and I think that Ms. Williams' property is under contract. Pretty sure. So, but again, I hear you, but look, I want preservation probably more than anybody, but I'm stuck on property rights. And I think it's great what the community wants, but I think we need to know exactly what they want. And if her property is under contract, which Mr. Krokoff, don't we think that's true, or do you know?
Well, I mean, what we're looking at here aren't site plans. They're the Arnold Mill visionary. So ultimately, the plans that come in are not necessarily going to match what you're seeing here. I think some of the key elements you're talking about, and I have a feeling it's what Caleb is going to get into, are the things that are going to be codified, like the setbacks and things along those lines. I wouldn't get too hung up on exactly where you see structures and exactly how you see them configured, because this is only, correct me if I'm wrong from the professionals, this is more visionary conceptual. The key points are what's coming, in my opinion. Did I properly answer your question? I'm not thinking I did.
Well, I think look, I love the visionary because if they buy into it, great, and then everybody's happy. But I think this sets an expectation that there was some discussion that the homes on these would be more like a Charleston style house, like long and narrow, but nowhere in the city, to my knowledge, is that a proven concept that people want to buy. So, visionary is great, but we're talking about other people's properties, and it's great to talk about somebody else's property and what they ought to do until it's your own. So I'm not sure where to go with this. I do like the idea of the road, but where do we go with that? Is that a GDOT decision, whether they're going to adopt that kind of a design?
Well, our work on this was in hopes of getting ahead of GDOT and their work they're going to do. So when they could start designing around our plan. But as we all know, there's no dead set date as to when GDOT's going to get moving with
So
their
they're not
widening.
beholden to our plan in any way. They would have to approve it, and they would have to like it, approve it, want to spend the money.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
I know Caleb has you got some more, right? I know we have a
Yeah.
lot of questions here, and I want to get the public comment. We have any public comment on this?
On C, we do.
Okay, so, on C? Okay. so
And
we
these
got
will be
this.
two together.
Okay.
So
I did want to say one other thing I totally hear your concern about taking liberties with private property and presenting it in this way. This is something that as planners, we do a lot in terms of when we do a small area plan, we look at all the possibilities, and they are presented as concepts in the sense that they will probably not happen in the exact way that is being shown because they're not site plans, they aren't schematic designs, they don't necessarily, they abide by as much topo and environmental constraints as we can use at this stage, but they are a level higher than that. So what's being codified are the ideas presented, the ability to reduce lot widths in order to get a greater environmental preservation surplus, for example, those kinds of things. And I think generally speaking, the community beyond the property owners was also very involved in this process, and they were interested in seeing that rural character be maintained.
Okay, but everybody who doesn't own property wants somebody else to have the view shed and to not develop and to do this. And I mean, you know,
Yeah.
but when you say codified, what's the legal ramification of a codification? Is that a word? Codification, codified?
It actually is a word, right? Yeah. When I hear that, what I'm thinking of is the difference between a plan and the actual implementation of the plan. So that's what I'm thinking of, is how do you take this vision and then translate it into actual code? So I think that's maybe the next step, the next part of the agenda we're going to hear. That's the way I would construe it.
So question on process. If property owners, like any of us, you know, let's say somebody's visioning our property, okay, and where we are. And actually that happened back when we were looking at the trail access along roads and the big brouhaha. This whole city was in an uproar 7 years ago on that. It feels very much the same thing, although we're dealing with a smaller group of people. If they're vehemently against this, do we just codify over their wishes and their property rights?
Well, I think as in most things, the devil's in the details. I mean, what does the actual codification look like? Is it one of several options, or is it the only option? Because I view those as very, very different. And so I'd want to know, is this something that the affected property owners have the right to apply to do this? Or is this something that the city's thinking about doing by legislative fiat? This is all you can do. Those are two very different scenarios, and I don't think we know the answer yet.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I know I got some questions, but I want you to finish. I think Caleb's going to go on the codification to see. Because really quick, you aren't requesting any zoning changes, correct? Not in the not
even in the codification.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and so we're now moving into the next step, which is a overlay that is being proposed as part of this next step. And Caleb's going to go over it, but it's a separate item only because it's a.
Okay, so B and C is going to be together.
It's technically a zoning item.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you, Shuba, and good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Caleb Rossico with TSW, and I will be presenting the Arnold Mill Road Hamlet overlay, which is the codification piece of the exercise. And before I begin, I did want to reiterate the conversation that we just had, which was that we are really here this evening to talk about what elements of that vision do we, TSW, recommend for codification. We know that anytime you do a community planning process, there is a very critical policy decision on how much you mandate what is in the vision and how much do you give property owners the willingness and the ability to have flexibility. And so what we've done is put forth a proposal for the council's consideration, which we hope is an appropriate level of balance. And I'll go into that in a moment. To begin with, the ordinance before you this evening is to create a new chapter or a new section in Article 6 called Arnold Mill Road Hamlet Overlay. And in order to not mess up the elegant structure of the UDC, we would actually need to renumber the historic preservation ordinance as well. So that's why the numbers are a little bit different than what you have today. But at its core, what we have tried to do is focus on those elements of the vision that relate to site and building design and the streetscape and the transportation elements. And so generally speaking, we have made this, for the most part, not entirely, but for the most part, a voluntary compliance option with regard to issues of setbacks, and I'll go into that a little bit more in detail, but we have codified, we have recommended mandating those elements that are critical to the public vision. And again, I'll talk about those as we go through them. I also wanted to mention to council that this has been through a very robust public process. The visioning process that Nick and Shuba talked about sort of got us the general framework, but we have incorporated feedback from CZIM. We have incorporated a lot of feedback from a very instructive conversation we had with the DRB and the Planning Commission, and some additional Planning Commission comments received last month. And so we're here to present it for you this evening in hopes of a May 5th adoption date. Now, in terms of applicability, this part of the city of Milton is already subject to the rural Milton overlay. And so what we have tried to do as part of this new overlay is acknowledge that there are a lot of city protections already embedded in that. And so we have proposed to create sub-districts of rural Milton in the same way that there is a sub-area for Birmingham Crossroads. So this area would continue to be zoned rural Milton, but then there would be a couple of additional requirements in these two overlay properties that we'll talk about in a moment. Where there is a conflict between the rural Milton overlay and the Arnold Mill overlay, the Arnold Mill overlay would apply. One other thing that I wanted to talk about before I go into details is that the proposal before you this evening is not about changing permitted uses, and it is not about changing density and lot size. During the planning process, there was a lot of conversations with the public. There were some members who wanted significantly more density than was entitled today. There were some who did not, and we felt overwhelmingly, based on the citizenry we heard from, we would recommend a density neutral plan and focus on the physical aspects of design. So how the buildings look, how far they're set back, and how do they achieve the streetscape element. So everything that I'm about to talk about this evening is truly density neutral. It can happen under AG1, or it can happen if council determines that 10 years down the road, you want to zone to a bit higher density, it could also happen under that. So very important distinction. Now, the structure of the overlay is broken up into two nodes, the Chadwick node at the north, adjacent to Cherokee County boundaries, and then a smaller node at another node at Cox Road. The zoning in these two areas does vary. The Chadwick node is zoned C1 today, AG1, and R2A. The Cox Road node is entirely zoned AG1 today. So again, those zoning districts which determine permitted use, permitted lot size, permitted density are all not within this overlay. They're all at the discretion of council to control over the long term. So the first piece of the new overlay is the codification of the streetscape along Arnold Mill Road that Nick mentioned. We are recommending that streetscape section and space for that streetscape section is actually mandated along Arnold Mill Road in these nodes for properties that abut it. So we've incorporated the actual roadway requirement as shown here. And we have also incorporated the modified rural view sheds that Nick mentioned earlier. So if areas are ever zoned commercial or used for non-residential purposes, they would have a 40-foot rural view shed, but if they are zoned for residential uses, they would have a 100-foot rural view shed. Now, I did want to point out that this varies a little bit from the concept plan, which showed 200. I felt, the staff felt that in the spirit of preserving that rural view shed, that 100 feet was more appropriate for the most part. So that is a little bit of a reduction, but again, we feel that with the rural view shed and with 100 feet, you're still going to have that rural character. So that is a mandate that would be imposed on the corridor today. And again, this is just showing the difference between the 40-foot and the 100. Now, one other thing I wanted to mention about this is that in the city of Milton today, rural view sheds are really protected areas. They can be used for woodland, they can be used for pasture land, but they cannot be used for septic unless a primary variance is granted. We have proposed that that would also apply with regard to this particular area. So when a property owner came in, say they were subdividing a property, they would have to protect that area unless they came in with an engineering report that said there was nowhere else they could put the septic field. That could be justification for a variance, as it is today citywide. Now, in addition to the rural view shed, there are several other types of standards in this overlay. There are streetscape standards that apply to the internal layouts of streets. There are requirements for the design of new streets. There are not requirements for the locations of new streets. And I think this is really critical in that we knew as the codifiers that the renderings were a vision. But property owners may choose to partake in that vision and develop according to that vision. They may choose to work together, or they may choose to work incrementally. And so unlike Crabapple, where there are literally mapped streets that developers have to build through what is called a regulating plan, we are not proposing that here. So as property owners come in and they lay out developments, they can lay out the streets in any way deemed appropriate, but what this will regulate is making sure that the streets have street trees and sidewalks along them, and they have some future connectivity, but there's no mandate, as there is in Crabapple, for those streets to be built in that exact location. And I think that's a really important distinction. So again, there's flexibility. We have also put a lot in the code for landscaping. This was something that the public was very strongly supportive of. Walkways, which was another part of the vision, outdoor lighting, buffers and streetscape screenings, and then fences and parking placement standards. So a lot of this, again, is already in rural Milton. It's already in, generally growth areas citywide in the city of Milton, just to make sure that development is held to the standard. Now, there is one area where there is a lot of additional flexibility, if you want, for property owners in this regard. And that relates to how we are proposing to treat properties that are zoned AG1. Now, what is not changing is the minimum 1 acre requirement. So every property developed under AG1, if this overlay were in effect, would still have to be a minimum size of 1 acre. But because some of the properties are having a deeper rural view shed imposed on them, the ones along Arnold Mill, we have recommended giving those property owners a little bit more flexibility. And so if you look at the diagrams here, the graphic on the right shows a typical 150 foot wide, 1 acre AG1 lot in the city of Milton. When you factor in the setbacks of 25 feet on the side, 50 on the rear, you end up with about 18,000 square feet of buildable area. So this is, again, your sort of citywide standard. But because we are requiring a deeper rural view shed along Arnold Mill Road, the vision showed a little bit more flexibility with regard to lot setbacks and lot widths. So the first thing is that we are recommending a reduction in the allowed lot width from 150 feet today to between 100 and 120 feet. So again, they have to have a 1 acre lot, but they can have a narrower lot. Now, in order to geometrically create a narrower lot that doesn't have a significantly reduced buildable area, we've had to make some slight modifications to the side setbacks. So we have recommended to reduce it from 25 feet to 15 feet only within these properties. And when you look at the mathematical outcome of that, you are basically in a situation where property owners still have roughly the same amount, in fact, a bit more buildable area than they do today. So I think the takeaway here is very important, is that there would be a real view shed on the rear, but the buildable area would not be reduced. So the portion not in the rural view shed has a little bit more flexibility, about 1,900 square feet more flexibility than they do today. I know, hope I've explained that well. A couple of other things that have changed here is we have recommended reducing the front yard setback internal to the development. Again, not along the public street, so not along New Providence Road, not along Arnold Mill Road, but internal to the development, in the spirit of giving a little bit more flexibility in sort of trade-off for the wider setback on the street. We've reduced the front setback to about 40 feet. Again, so generally speaking, not huge changes, but changes that we feel give property owners the same amount of buildable area as they have today. Now that's for residential, that's for the AG1. For all of the other properties, we have proposed to make a couple of overarching amendments. Again, we only have 1 or 2 C1 properties, and then we have a couple of R2A. In these areas, we have recommended a front yard setback internal to the development of 10 feet and separation of buildings of 10 feet. So very consistent with the vision Nick represented, but again, only internal to the project, not any of the existing roadways.
Caleb, on the zoning district standards, that's for the entire Arnold Mill Road?
No, it is only for the 2 nodes.
Okay, so the change in rural view shed for the change is just for those 2 nodes?
Yes, sir.
That's it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So again, these standards would only apply to the Cox Road node and then the Chadwick node.
Okay.
Everything else in between would not be within the overlay. It would be subject to the standard rural view shed for the city.
Does the current Chadwick development, what's the view shed there now? Because it doesn't seem like it has 100
Correct.
feet.
I believe theirs was less. It's 40
Okay.
feet.
Yeah, it's AG1.
Okay, got it. I
and-
forgot. Yeah.
So 40 feet.
Got it.
Okay, go forward. The final part of the overlay relates to building design. Again, this is nothing new to Milton. Milton has some of the most robust building design standards in North Georgia. So we've really taken a cue here from the work in the rest of the city, and have recommended codifying building standards that are very similar to what exists in Birmingham Crossroads today. They have been codified based on feedback from the city architect and based on public input and based on feedback from the Planning Commission and the DRB. So generally speaking, what does that mean? Well, it means that buildings in this area have to be one of 5 architectural styles: Colonial Revival, Craftsman, Greek Revival, Queen Anne, Folk Victorian, and then Vernacular. Before you are some images of these. I did want to point out, however, that we truly acknowledge that some of these houses may be, the graphics may be smaller than what you might actually be getting in Milton architecturally. So what is really important to emphasize is that these are about architectural styles. They're not about the width of houses. Those are all going to be controlled by the underlying zoning. So as you think about how these styles could actually apply to a 100 to a 120 foot wide lot, Shuba ended up going around Crabapple and finding that there are a lot of examples of houses already built in Milton just behind us here that would actually conform to some of these architectural standards. So although there has been a assertion that some of these would be Charleston style, I do think that statement is probably a little bit of a misnomer. In the city of Charleston, lots tend to be 40 to 50 foot wide. These are still 100 foot wide lots. And so this particular home here is about 60 feet wide. It does go deeper, but it is not the very dense urban condition that you would see in Charleston. You would still have a very large home at the front, and there could be additional wings to the rear. So it would be like this home, or another example from, again, right behind us. The front of the house is, again, 40 to 60 feet wide, and there would be rear additions, but it's not the very tightly packed urban condition that a lot of folks think about when they think about Charleston. So we wanted to just show an example of what these might look like based on some of the architecture already in the city of Milton today. And then one final element of the building design, and something that directly came from our conversations with the DRB and the Planning Commission, is that those bodies have been spending a lot of time thinking about what happens in winter with regard to commercial and outdoor patios uses. And so again, even though we only have the C1 sites and the Chadwick node, we wanted to be proactive and we wanted to reflect their feedback. So there are recommended standards here that would codify the quote unquote Milton design that they have been imposing on projects in Crabapple and Birmingham. This would require a very high quality taut patio enclosure that is removable, and that would be very durable and long lasting. And so this is something where we had worked very closely with them to actually codify their standard. And very importantly, it could not be left up all year long. It could only be left up between December 1st through March 1st. The intention is to not create a condition where developers say they're going to build a commercial building and they're going to have a porch, and then they permanently enclose that porch and use it year round. The other thing that I wanted to point out that is not in this ordinance that did come up at our meetings with the Planning Commission and the DRB was that there was interest in also updating the signage standards. So today, there are general citywide sign standards that do a pretty good job especially in the AG1 of the residential character. We were asked by those bodies to review the ordinances and come up with a recommendation. What we have recommended based on that feedback is that we feel very confident that the AG1 standards through rural Milton work extremely well for AG1 properties. But because there could be commercial uses one day in the future, or there are some commercial uses at the north end, we did feel that the city should probably adopt something similar to the Birmingham Crossroads for any future commercial uses in this area. Those do require a bit smaller signage. They do have material restrictions. They do have design restrictions that would be much more in keeping with this particular district. And so we're recommending that as a future step, the city adopt those sign amendments as well. And then a final discussion with the Planning Commission that I did want to make council aware of relates to the property that has frontage along New Providence Road. It was pointed out to us that this particular property is not within the Arnold Mill Road character area. It was added initially to this study and it was designed according to the study. However, there was some question, which I think is a policy question for the mayor and council to consider, as to whether this should or should not be within the overlay. Again, from day one, we've shown it in all the plans. We've talked to the public about it. We've shown a concept about what it might look like in the future. And we have recommended codifying for the future in this area, but it does not have frontage along Arnold Mill Road. And so that is a concern of the Planning Commission that we wanted to share with you for your consideration.
Question, Caleb, just regarding that. Let's say we don't adopt that as part of the plan. Could they opt in the future to make it more aesthetically pleasing if it's a combined development? I'm just.
Technically, I don't believe they could opt to. I mean, could they? Would you allow them to request to rezone into the overlay?
But if it would it be a rezoning or it wouldn't be a rezoning?
You have to. The only thing that these properties get that they don't already have is the little narrower lots. They still have 1 acre lot size. But if they wanted to do a lot that was 120 feet wide versus 150, their options would be to file variances for that, which is a size, shape, topography, hardship, probably wouldn't meet the technical requirements, or request to rezone into the overlay. And I will defer to the city attorney as to whether the city would entertain that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I think that as we begin to distill this into the actual codification, if you will, the actual granular part of it, we can take that into account, whether we want to give that sort of a flexibility. That would, I think, address your concerns, Councilmember Cookerly, as well, if the actual zoning to it was part of it as opposed to automatic. What I'm used to with overlays is you don't zone to the overlay. The overlay literally sits on top of the underlying base zoning and is mandatory, is what I'm used to. So this would be a little bit of a different creature, but I think if that's what Milton wants to do, I think we could probably make it work.
I have a number of questions. Caleb, can I go, or is anybody else?
Do we want to do public comment first before? How many public comment questions do
Just
we have?
one.
Are we done with the presentation?
Yes,
Are
sir.
you done? Are you good with public comment first? Is that good with everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it.
I invite Mary Cronk to the podium, please.
Good evening, Mary Cronk, 600 Hickory Mill Lane. And I've been following along with the Arnold Mill small plan. One of the things I think we should consider is when we are looking at making lots more narrow, even if they're longer, a more narrow lot is going to look like it's more dense. I think that that's something that we would want to consider when we're looking at that. I know it may not be from the rural view shed, but just how does that more narrow lot impact the overall? And one additional thing, I know that the signage ordinance, that it's going to be pulled over hopefully from Birmingham Crossroads. When this was, I guess, proposed in the Planning Commission meeting, there was something about internally illuminated signs. And I know you guys didn't see that slide, but what I wanted to make sure of is that internally illuminated signs are not allowed in this area, just like they're not allowed in Birmingham Crossroads, because I think that negates the idea of a small kind of a village aspect. So I just wanted to make sure when that text amendment is there, that internally illuminated signs are not allowed. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
That's all for item C.
Okay. Councilmember Cookerly? Questions?
Yeah, please. Hi. So Caleb, when you were speaking about the stakeholders who were in support of codifying this, you didn't mention the property owners. You mentioned everybody but.
Mhm. So a lot of that is going to be the visioning process, which Nick was in discussion with. Quite frankly, a lot of the property owners did want us to recommend higher density. That is an accurate statement. We got a lot of comments. Well, why are you not changing it from AG1? Why are you not recommending higher density? Again, I believe that is a very important policy decision for the mayor and city council to make. I would not feel comfortable recommending that because of the statement that the city will not be extending sewer to this corridor, and because it was only a few of the property owners versus a much larger group. And I feel that, that's why you're elected, is to make those hard decisions.
No, I understand that, and I understand that is sort of the baseline and the wishes of council. Well, let me just see if I understand this. So in anybody's given property, AG1, if the lots are buildable, you could max out to the buildable number of lots minus the view shed, correct? You have the option to take a more narrow lot and put homes closer together if you so desire. A builder could do that. But for what stated purpose would that be?
Really, the stated purpose for that is to compensate for the rear portion being part of the rural view shed.
The rear portion or the front
Well,
portion?
Yeah, to compensate for the rural view shed portion.
Which is along Arnold Mill.
Arnold Mill,
Yeah,
Arnold
okay,
Mill.
so that seems like the front to me.
Yeah.
Okay. And
It is
so-
the front, but they're assuming there would be an internal drive.
Okay, and so 100 feet is probably not quite the width of this room, probably. And typically, it's what Mr. Kokoff, the rural view shed is
60 feet,
60, so additional 40 feet.
40 plus 20.
And if I may, Councilwoman, you know, short of, we were discussing earlier how do we handle the New Providence property? There may also be a scenario where we chose to only grant that flexibility on lot width to properties that were actually subject to the Arnold Mill Road rural view shed. That would be very easy for us to write if that was council's direction.
Okay. Look, I'm not indicting anybody, but having heard from the property owners a number of times, I don't think they feel that their comments have been incorporated. And so this is not the time or the place, but I would ask that you go back and you look for recent emails and other things that you might have gotten on the last time this came up, and just make sure that we are being sensitive to what their wishes are. And I really can't adjudicate that.
I mean, can we just ask the question, outside of wanting higher density, what else did the property owners want that we're not doing?
Staff has handled most of the conversations, and so I'm going to allow.
Well, nothing else that they wanted. They wanted more density.
So their only objection to this plan is the fact that we're not granting them more density.
Yeah, they were pointing to the previous study and whatever recommendations were made previously in 2014 that were not really adopted back then. But they kept pointing to that, plan to ask for more density.
Okay, because like I hear this presentation, I see this, and I kind of break it down to what are we restricting and what are we giving them, and it really is just the size of the lots, not the number of lots.
If they choose to take it.
Correct, but like that's what you're proposing is the shape of the lots, and then the setback, the allowable setback from the front and the sides. That's pretty much the only difference. And what that does is that allows you to have 60 feet or whatever it was from the road that would not be built on, so that it would remain rural.
Vegetative buffer.
Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate visioning, but I can't remember too many times in my career here with the city. It just feels like a little bit of the twilight zone where we're the developer and the builder. And, the builder has to decide, or the developer and the builder, they have to decide what will work and what's economically feasible. So remains to be seen.
I mean, unless they do an all residential,
Enclave
plat,
there,
I mean,
yeah.
they have to submit for a rezoning for anything, correct? And then when they submit that rezoning is when you're really going to start getting into the weeds on some of this stuff, and they're going to have to figure out how you're going to fit a septic system for some of the commercial properties, which they did further north. So, no, I understand, and I think this has been a long road. I was part of the 2014 plan that didn't get adopted, so see where this goes. Any questions from council?
It's a lot of work. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank y'all.
Thank you
Appreciate it.
very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Very thorough. Thank you.
Okay, will you please call this next item?
Item D is discussion of RZ 2504, a text amendment to Article 9 Site Development, specifically adding Section 9.1.4.A.8 to clarify parking of commercial vehicles and equipment within agricultural and single-family districts, and modifying Section 9.1.6.c, heavy construction of the Unified Development Code for the City of Milton, Georgia. Our interim Community Development Director, Ms. Diana Wheeler.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This next item on your agenda is a text amendment that comes out of a code enforcement need. It is something that we've struggled with a little bit in some areas, and so we want to address this as a text amendment with you. And it concerns the location of heavy commercial equipment in residential parking areas. And what we're proposing is that we prohibit the allowance of having the storage of commercial vehicles, and by that we mean the heavy commercial construction equipment within residential areas. We've had situations where some folks who do this sort of thing for a living, site contractors, grading contractors, builders, and others, store their equipment on their property at home in AG areas. And so code enforcement has been challenged because in residential areas, people don't generally like to see this sort of thing when you don't have an active construction site. And so what we're recommending is that there be a code amendment to say that in single-family districts and agricultural districts used for single-family dwellings, the storing of commercial vehicles and construction equipment is prohibited, except when there's an active building permit or land disturbance permit on the property. And when we talk about heavy construction commercial vehicles, we've got a definition for what that is, and you can see from what's up on the screen, we want to add to the terminology of heavy construction, commercial vehicles, earth-moving equipment, and other construction vehicles. We want to eliminate the word tractors because we know that a lot of people on their farms have tractors, and we're not looking to do that. But we are looking to limit the storage of commercial vehicles, heavy-duty construction equipment on private property when we don't have active construction. That does not apply to panel trucks, work trucks, or contractor vehicles. And since sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words, we want to give you some examples of what we're talking about. So the top 3 pictures are the sort of things that you would see and would be permissible in residential areas. We're talking about contractor trucks, panel trucks, small earth-moving or hay-moving equipment, that sort of thing. Perfectly acceptable in agricultural zoning districts, in residential areas, not allowed for just storage purposes, unless there's construction on site, is some of the equipment that you see at the bottom of the screen. And those are things that are really intended for heavy-duty commercial construction use, not something that you would want to see in a residential area just sitting idly because they're not being stored properly in a, on a commercial building site. And so that is our recommendation and something that we would look for you to consider at the May 5th meeting.
We have any public comment on this?
Not on this one, sir.
Okay. Any council questions or anything?
Do we have places where equipment of that size, like cats and things like that, are visible that we know of?
Yeah, it can be an industrial area, but we don't have a lot of those.
Well, the
You mean,
reason-
are you asking, is there an example
Well,
of
the
this
reason I
now?
ask is, on some of the larger lots, people are parking equipment, but you can't really see it because there's trees and they have garages back up, and it does keep some land in large lots. I wonder if maybe, you're the expert, but is it better to proffer an opportunity for them to be registered and pay for that and understand the rules that they couldn't show their equipment? Because I can think a number near me where they're, 8, 9, 10 acres, but they use them as a business. But again, it's not carved up with rooftops. So, and you can't see the equipment. Is
And
it
I think
just if
that
it's
that's the
visual?
critical part, is that we're complaint driven. If you can't see it, people don't know about it, it doesn't bother anyone, it's not going to generate a complaint. The only reason that we have this before you this evening is because we've had complaints in areas where these things are visible.
That's right. Is it visible from the road?
Visible from the road.
Visible from.
Correct.
Okay, large equipment just sitting there.
Is that,
Right.
is visible from the road in your recommended condition or just visible? Just curious.
The recommended condition is that they be prohibited. We could include language about not visible from the road, but that creates an issue as well, because sometimes they're not visible perhaps from the road, but maybe the complaint was generated by the neighbor who lives behind them and also doesn't want to see this. So it's sort of a fine line. It's not a huge issue, it's just that where we've had problems, we don't have the language in the code to really address them properly. And so that's what this is about.
Question, are the problems that we're having though, is it visible from the road?
Yes.
Okay.
It's building material too, correct?
It's construction equipment, heavy equipment that's being stored.
Just the equipment, not the materials.
Yeah, the materials aren't allowed to be stored unless there is an actual building permit or some other kind of permit, and it's active.
Right.
So we can deal with that, and we've got the language in the code to deal with that. It's just that sometimes some of these folks who do this sort of thing for a living bring their equipment home and then just leave it there, park it there.
Does that include the large trailers? I mean, the extremely large trailers?
No, we're talking about construction equipment.
So that has nothing to do with people keeping 2 or 3 big trailers on their property?
No, it's not about that. It's about construction equipment.
Are those that have created the offenses, are they on smaller lots?
Yes.
They are.
Usually
Okay.
on smaller lots.
Just wonder if the language should be flipped, that it has to be concealed, it can't be visible, and it can't be in any kind of a steel structure in front of the house or,
I think a middle ground, because I kind of have the same concerns.
Yeah.
I think if we're having the issues, if it's visible from the road, then maybe that's,
But it could be offensive to a neighbor too.
I mean,
so-
a million things could be
Yeah.
offensive to a neighbor. I mean, if I live to a 10-acre lot,
Yeah.
I mean.
I think the concern is if it permanently looks like a construction zone.
Yeah.
Like,
correct.
No one likes living in a permanent
Yeah,
construction zone.
I just
And
wonder if we should flip
that's the
it so
issue at
that it
hand.
can't look that way rather than prohibiting.
Since this is a work session, you're getting some feedback and
Yeah.
maybe we can
Yeah.
retool it. And
Just
come back.
remember that anything that we put into sort of a penal code that can be enforced by way of our police power has to be objectively understandable. When you're talking about concepts like, can you see it from the road? You begin to infuse it with park that day where it's not parked the next day. We've got to have code enforcement that have something that's very objective, very tangible, that is either yes or no. You either violated this or you didn't.
See, that's what I'm kind of worried about, because people could now use this as you're driving down the road. Oh, it's construction equipment. Calling code enforcement.
What if there's some applicable setback, like similar to what we were just talking about on the other? What if it was some setback related? That would have, I mean.
I heard that from what I heard the
On
setback
small
would be.
lots, that wouldn't happen.
On the small lots, it wouldn't happen at all. The one in particular is a small lot. Carol's talking about 10 acres. They put it in the back of their 10 acres.
Yeah. Mr.
Not-
Prokop
Steve,
looks
yeah.
like he's ready to pounce.
He's grabbing the mic.
Just a couple of considerations for the council. First, I do believe the critical statement in what Diana has brought up today was clarifying parking of commercial vehicles, because I do believe that this is already prohibited in our code. And Robin and I debated this a bit earlier today regarding outdoor storage in our current UDC. That being said, obviously we could change that as well if the council wanted to allow this type of use at some of these larger lots. Now, there are 2 other considerations. First, is it a home-based business? Because if it's a home-based business, there are requirements about what can be brought in and out of that property related to that home-based business. And second, unless they have these large equipment for their own enjoyment on their large parcel, they're coming and going every day for work. And you'll have workmen coming to pick those vehicles up to be able to bring those to other sites if that's what they're being used for. So buffering will help as far as the visual aspect when you're driving down the road, or potentially if you're a neighbor. But you'll also potentially have the impact of those vehicles moving to and from the property every day. So I do believe we have 2 issues related to that. And like I said, one, the use of that as a home-based business and what isn't allowed there. The second one I talked about with that potential impact, and I still would like some analysis potentially. I do believe that I would argue it's covered under one of our UDC articles already, and that Diana is merely clarifying it.
Yeah, everything you're suggesting there shouldn't be a problem already, but there clearly is. And so she's trying to refine that to make sure that for those citizens that don't like seeing a constant construction zone, that they don't.
That sums it
Do we
up.
give you enough
So,
feedback that we could tweak it and maybe
Yes,
go from there?
I
yes.
mean, are we going to come back with something on the next?
Well, what would the
Councilman?
council like, considering
Thank you.
those aspects of it, what would the council like to see as it relates to this?
I mean, I think the feedback that I've gotten is, to your point, if it's already in the code and we're just merely mirroring something in the previous code for consumption, that's great. But I also think you have some feedback that this could be a incentive for these larger lots to where if someone wants to if someone's been parking a construction vehicle on their 10-acre lot, if they want to move dirt or so on, I mean, I just don't see how that, I just have an issue with this, someone calling.
Yeah, it all depends on what's visual.
Yeah, I think the visual aspect is the most important.
That's everything you're talking about.
So
So
I think
however
that gives
you,
you some feedback.
Which is Diana's initial point. We are a complaint-driven
Right.
deal,
Right.
and it's,
Yeah,
people
somebody's
complain when
unhappy.
they see it,
I
and that's
understand.
what's happened.
thank you.
Is that
Okay.
good? Good
Very
enough?
Sounds
Okay,
good.
cool. Thank you. Okay, please call the next item.
Mayor, item E is discussion of RZ 2503, a text amendment to Article 12, Administration, Section 12.8.6.e, demolition permits, public hearing to amend notification requirements to the Unified Development Code for the City of Milton, Georgia. Diana Wheeler.
So this is also a proposed text amendment, and it has to do with a section of our code that deals with demolition permits and the requirement to notify folks 30 days in advance. We put an ad in the paper 30 days before the DRB meeting to let people know, but this is not something of general interest, and the 30 days is sort of onerous on folks who are trying to apply for a demolition permit, and they've told us that they're having to wait a long time, and they're usually approved, and so we are recommending that the 30 days just be reduced to 15 days, and that would be in that one section that you see up on the screen on your right, where it talks about advertising for 15 days instead of 30. This has nothing to do with zoning requirements or anything like this. This is just a Milton thing that we do just to provide notification to people.
Okay, do you comment on this?
We do on E.
Okay.
I'd like to invite Mary Cronk to the podium.
Mary Cronk, 600 Hickory Mill Lane. Actually, the comment that I had wasn't about this portion of the text amendment. There was another portion of the text amendment that came before zoning, and it also came before the Planning Commission, and that was about removing notification of the community zoning information meetings from being published in the Herald. And I don't know if that's been pulled.
Stop the clock.
I'll give you 5 extra seconds.
As it turns out, we did propose a zoning amendment to modify the advertising requirement. What happened? For the CZIM from instead of posting it in the Milton Herald, to put it just on the city website and through social media. The Planning Commission did not support that modification. And so then since it was a staff item, we went ahead and just withdrew it.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Cronk, you good?
No comment.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any comment or
That
questions?
concludes for E, Mayor.
Any questions for staff on this?
That's great. That's how it should work. It's cool.
All right, thank you. Call the next item.
Next item, Mayor, is F, discussion of proposed Birmingham Park conservation easement. Our Public Works Director, Ms. Sarah Leaders.
Good evening. So this item is a step towards permanently and legally protecting Birmingham Park through conservation easement. And the purpose of this presentation is really just going to be a focus on one piece of it. And the first is to define the area that we want to delineate within Birmingham Park for the conservation easement. There's several parcels involved, and I'll show those and then provide a recommended area for discussion. To begin with, I'll quickly highlight what conservation easements are, go over the Birmingham Park parcels, and then, like I said, that proposed area delineation. So in November of 2023, Ken Gerard had presented with you all the basis of conservation easements, and these are some points from that presentation that it's about protection, preservation, and perpetuity. The state code allows for governing authorities to grant conservation easements on property they own. The third thing is it's established by deed. So there's kind of two pieces to that deed. First is the agreement between the owner, which would be the city, and a holder that would protect the preservation of that particular property. The agreement itself could regulate improvements as well as uses of the land. And this component of the conservation easements, we're going to placeholder for a future discussion, and I'll highlight that in the next steps. But the second component of the deed is defining the area with tracts and legal description. So that's really what we're talking about tonight. So these are the city-owned parcels around the Birmingham Park property. It just shows all the different parcel lines in kind of a light gray, and then the old right-of-way of Old Bullpen Road that runs through the property. This breaks down the property into a couple different acquisitions as well as deed restrictions. This is all developed based on the tax parcel research that I coordinated with Ken's office on looking at what's currently deed restricted and what the sizes of those parcels are. So the first one is the green areas, and we have one area that we call contiguous. It's a complete enclosed area of 134.83 acres. That's the green, that's kind of this larger shape. We do have a smaller green area that's on the other side of New Bullpen Road, and that was just the land lots are square shaped. So when the road cut through the land lot, it created a just over 1.5 acre parcel on the other side of New Bullpen Road. So if you can see the arrow pointing, that's the additional area. So the green areas were deed restricted to parkland and or green space when they were transferred from Fulton County to the city in 2007. The red areas, there's 3 different parcels that are shown in this kind of red color highlight. And those were acquired by Fulton County through a Department of Natural Resources grant. And so those are actually deed restricted as green space per that grant. And that's 30.92 acres. And then we have a couple parcels that have no deed restrictions. The blue area was acquired from Fulton County Facility Corporation, and that transaction took place in the last couple years where they officially transferred it to the city. But it was set aside as a facility parcel. That's where the fire station sits and the public works yard. That included 39.2046 acres. And last, the city acquired a parcel several years ago that is the orange outline here. It's just around 2 acres. And so that has no current deed restrictions. And finally, the Old Bullpen Road right-of-way that runs through the property. There's segments that the tax parcel map still shows as right-of-way, but I'll get into a recommendation on a formal abandonment within the conservation area. So based on those current parcel layouts, this is the proposed area that we'd like to discuss to move forward with for the conservation easement. And the proposal is to take that current unrestricted area, which was the blue, let's see, you can see the equestrian parking lot is here kind of in the middle of that blue area. So it's to take where that parking lot is and the fencing for the public works yard, and to turn some of that area into add that area to the conservation easement, and then to retain the area that's not shaded for the fire station, the public works yard, and possible future usage of the property that is adjacent to that, as well as the right-of-way from Hickory Flat to kind of the end of that point. That creates nearly 180 87 acres of conservation easement, and just the 21 of unrestricted facility type usage along Hickory Flat. With Old Bullpen Road, we could look at an official abandonment within the conservation easement so that all just becomes conservation area. So the next steps, the reason we wanted to talk about this delineation tonight was the first thing we'll need is a map that shows what tracks we plan to create for this easement. We'll do a legal review of the exhibits, get a boundary survey that clearly describes the area for conservation. And at the same time or after that, Ken's office will assist with helping to talk with a possible holder. That could be one of the trusts that would establish that agreement. So that's going to set the uses and the restrictions that are possible, and there'd be a future update and discussion on the agreement terms. But for right now, we just wanted to talk about the area, get some feedback, and I will go back to the proposed area and open it up for any questions or comments on what's being shown.
Do we have any public comment, Tammy?
We do, sir.
Okay.
I invite Mary Cronk to the podium.
Sorry for number 3 here. Mary Cronk, 600 Hickory Mill Lane. I'm really, really excited about seeing Birmingham Park go into a conservation easement. This is going to be big for our city to be able to do this. What I would really love, because I'm greedy, to have as much of that conserved as we can. If there's any way to get that 21.67 acres that's unrestricted, to get that smaller, so it's more, so we can include more in the conservation easement, but then understand what could go into that unrestricted area. That's going to be really important as you're going through this process, because if it can become active parks or things like that, I don't know that that goes along well with our conservation easement component. So just, you guys do good due diligence, and this is a really good step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you.
That
All right.
concludes public comment. Mayor.
Thanks. Sarah, will you please pull up that map again? Thanks. And I think one of the questions I think we're going to have too is probably the next step is what can be added even within the conservation easement? Because I'm sure we would want additional trails in the future and, more passive activities. And so that would be a question later. So go back to that map again. All right, let's see that. We got the fire, so at the fire station and public works building.
Works, all the storage back there.
Yeah, I would like to hear maybe what city's futures plans are, but I would think the road frontage next to the fire station, we should probably leave that as unrestricted in case fire station needs to expand in the future or anything like that. Anything behind the fire station, I don't know what. Leave it.
Which part is behind the fire station?
Beauty of these is that we can tie it as tight.
Yeah.
Or as, well, I mean, there does come a point when the third-party conservation entity, if it's too loose, they won't want it.
Right,
Because
yeah.
they want to safeguard properties that are truly, locked down, but we do have some flexibility.
Sarah,
And I can pull up just the.
You can use your mouse and you can kind of say what I was, draw that line.
Yeah, how big is that field on the left side?
The what, Doug? How big is what?
That field that's on the left side of what we're looking at leaving unrestricted, how big is that field?
So it's between 7 and 8 acres is what is, and I can, so if we took kind of this, hopefully you all can see the arrows
Man,
here.
can
Okay,
you
so
zoom
we
out a
took,
little bit? I'm like,
if we took.
I'm not that old yet.
Careful.
I didn't mention any names, man. Oh, there we go.
Getting a headache over here.
Sarah, you're doing a great job.
Yeah. Doug with brownie.
Okay,
point.
so we took this point and drew it down
I
to
know.
where the 2 acre stops.
Mhm.
This parcel is between, it's like 7.5 acres is what this field is. And then the orange is 2 acres. So we've got
About 10 acres
what,
over there.
about 10 acres that is currently not being used for any facility usage. The public works yard fencing is, it runs kind of connecting this point of that DNR grant property up and then runs along the equestrian roadway and then down to the point where the access road for the public works yard branches off.
Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking if the septic system fails at the fire station and we need to, some area for that down the road, I think that's important. But that field next to the public works, for example, I don't know if y'all have any long-term plans or anything. I just want to be careful.
What's the benefit of including it other than just securing it as conserved?
From an expansion standpoint, we just don't know what we might need for public works. I mean, even tonight we heard about compost. So perhaps it's just having a little excess capacity there couldn't hurt us.
What does putting it in the trust preclude us from doing? Like, would it preclude you from putting a compost pile?
It depends what is in the document, the actual conveyance document. I mean, that's what I was getting to, is that when we begin to work with the third-party administrator, what is considered the conservation prohibitions, we're going to work out with them. But what I was also saying is, typically my experience with these entities has been that they're purists. I mean, if it's conservation, they want it locked down pretty tight. And so probably the more flexibility we want to blend in, the more of these third parties we may run away. And they're like, we don't want to really hold that. That's not really conservation.
What do you currently hold at the public works? What's all stored there, the facility? What do y'all use it for?
So we have a covered storage that's on this side property line adjoining that field that has the snowplows, the barrels, cones, things that wouldn't fit inside the building. And then we have our materials, salt, rock, in a couple concrete bins that kind of wrap this corner. Here's the building. It's just a metal storage building that has the things that need to be protected from the weather. And then we've got our outdoor material storage, and then the covered for snowplows. We also have our contractor provides us with a backhoe and a dump truck that stay in the outside of the yard, and then some other various materials.
So give me the Sarah Leader's Public Works Director 20 years from now. What?
You'll be 10 toes up in the shade.
Based on where the city's heading in the direction, what do you envision that to be based on our growth and stuff that we need it for?
The biggest area I think we need just some capacity on is when we have events that bring down a lot of trees and we have to haul the debris somewhere. We've been using the area that's behind the active yard piece. We have just some other land that we keep a dumpster, as well as all of that tree debris. So, that's the uncertainty of it is, if we had something that we needed to get out of the right of way and out of the roadways, and just kind of that debris management area is, right now it's working fine, the area we have, and the active yard piece with the materials and equipment. If we were to take on road maintenance ourselves, we might have more equipment that would need to be in that active yard area. But
Is it fair to say that we could shave off a couple acres for the public works and a couple acres for the fire station? And I think we could be good maybe for future use or so, and maybe see what that line would look like at the next meeting. Y'all really start thinking about that?
Hey, Sarah, if there was like a hurricane that came through here, or some of these tornadoes and stuff, then you had thousands of trees that dropped all over the place. Where would you take them now?
they would go to this area behind the.
And it'd fill up that whole 10 acres.
Mm-hmm. And we do have to, we
Well,
come
it's
in.
not 10 acres. Where she's talking about is not 10 acres. Where she's talking about.
No, but I'm saying,
The
if that
field.
many trees came down and everything, that's the only spot we would have now to take them. Is that those 10 acres right there, right? Or no?
It would be for us to take them. We could we could hire a contractor and say, you have to remove the trees from the right of way and take them to somewhere where you can dispose of them. It's just more cost effective. And we typically use our crew to pick them up, which means they have to come to the property that we own.
I know, I agree with exactly where you're going. I just want to make sure we're.
Yeah, I just hate to see us take away something that, who knows, that happens once every now and then, but you need to be prepared
happened.
for it. Yeah,
Elaine.
unfortunately, yeah.
I think you know where we're headed. Does that give you enough guidance on that to maybe draw some
And-
lines for us?
Would you like to see it one more time before we officially hire a surveyor to tell about? I mean, I'm thinking we take kind of maybe the edge of this tract and bring it up and then follow the shape. So we're connecting this. It's right around 1.5 acres of that was preserved in as green space per the DNR grant, and we either connect it with maybe half of this area.
Yeah,
something
because
like
then
that.
you're gonna then that other area is basically, oh no, it can't be connected to the north. Okay, yeah.
And keeping an access point off Hickory Flat too would be a good thing to have from the Public Works
I'm
yard.
not sure why you just don't go the way she had it originally. I think you need to have that land in case something comes up.
I'd rather play it safe than sorry. So
Because once it goes in easement, you're locked out, right? Forever.
You're done.
Yeah,
You're done.
and I think we need, who knows how big the city's gonna get, what's gonna happen? If you take all of that away, I think you're,
And I guess to the Councilmember Jacobus's point, you can always add it in. I mean, you can always include it later, correct? I mean, you can always.
There'll be some administrative expense, but that's.
And it's also not going to get developed unless city council suggests it gets developed.
right.
Correct.
And it may not be us. I think that's the point, is it could be the next city council if we all get the boot, but.
Yeah, I don't see that fitting active parks or anything. I think to Councilman Jacobus's point, it's going to be more of a public works expansion or a fire department, which is for the citizens to, for their benefit. So. Everybody okay with that? Moving
Good.
forward?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Is that the last item?
That's the last item, Mayor.
Yeah, okay. Good night.
Night.
No official adjournment. See you later.